Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. We are here today for the Transnational Memory Forum between Portugal and Italy on anti-fascist resistance. Um, Before we start, I would like to introduce the project. So, SolRem is a review project which works on the historical memory of far right movements and extreme um, fascist regimes. um, it contains the transnational dimension as it is a project made of Portugal, Italy, Spain, Romania, and Finland. So there is this transnational dynamic that we also bring here today to this transnational memory forum. Um, we have Professor Barreira with us. He has a PhD in History of Portuguese Art by the Faculty of Arts and Humanities of University of Porto. He is also an assistant professor of the Department of Heritage Studies at the same university and an integrated researcher on CITSEM, Transdisciplinary Research Center on Culture, Space and Memory. His main research fields are moving image media and visual studies, where he has developed many works on those topics. He also studies and other research fields include the history of architecture and the urban history of the modern period, and he also collaborates in trainings and other research projects like this one. And today he's going to talk to us about the position of cinema as a form of resistance to fascism before and after the revolution. And we also have with us Giuseppe Lipari, which is he is a PhD student in political science and sociology at the Scuola Normale Superiore from Sicily. His work is currently focused on the student movement of secondary education, and he has investigated student politics in higher education. His ongoing research looks at the role of student unions of secondary education in continuities of student politics. He has been involved in social movements since high school, and he holds a BA in political science and international relations from the University of Palermo and an MA in international relations from the University of Bologna. And today he's going to talk to us about the impact of the resistance in shaping democratic Italy and about the importance of testing memory in attempts of constitutional change. So I think we'll start.
Okay. Thank you, Margarita, and thank you for the invitation. This is a bit off my main research area, so it was quite a challenge to think about film and media as an anti-fascism resistance amongst the Portuguese context. So, as you can see on the screen, I will talk. I will talk about images, production, reception, and edition or release in media of a number of films that were quite important to think about uh, what what was the role of film and other media in the relation with fascism, and of course with the building of an alternative uh, amongst film language. Of course, we have I have 10 points here, or 10 periods. We have to think that like uh, most European film schools or currents, the Portuguese production in the period between the wars was uh, ve- very marked by nationalism feeling. So we have that in the Italian production, we have that in the French production, we have that in the German production, and with several nuances. Of course, Portuguese production was in the silent period until 1930 was very much Portuguese film about Portuguese subject on Portugal on Portuguese authors made by most of the time uh, foreigners like French and German, but uh, with Portuguese sponsorship. So with the dictatorship came into existence in 1926 after the 28th of May Revolution. Of course, film was not indifferent to all of this uh, because most of the productions uh, followed uh, the transition to sound film and were were very expensive. So the role of the state was very important in this transition to sound production. And this coincided with the dictatorship, the establishment, and the entailment of the dictatorship from the military dictatorship to the national dictatorship, and the Estado Novo, or the new state, from 1933, the regime with the new constitution was called. So the government had a very different role in the First Republic and uh, uh, in its relation with film and in the dictatorship, not only because of the differences between the and the organization of the state, but also because the Islam production managed to create a technical revolution on itself. And of course, the dictatorship saw on film as it, it occurred in Germany, it occurred in uh, Italy, saw on film a very important tool for propaganda. But we have to address this question with a little bit uh, of care, if you will, because there is a law from 1927, the so-called 100-meter law, that obliged all the movie sessions to have at least 100 meters of Portuguese produced film. This was a kind of protectionist law. It was, of course, related to the sponsorship of film, independent or stately backed production. Also, it was a kind of way to address problems. It was not very much propaganda oriented. It was more or less something that was being called into question even before the dictatorship. So we have all those things, and of course we have the censorship, and that's one of the main problems because we. In Italy, for example, we have Mussolini to power from 1922, more or less, onwards. In Portugal, this happens almost at the end of the 30s, the consolidation of the structures of the dictatorship. So, in cinema history, this is very, very different. Cinecittà was created almost at the end of the 1930s. So we have to address this not only as film under dictatorship and after or before dictatorship, but all the changes and nuances. And the censorship role is very interesting because in 1933 we have the Constitution, Estado Novo, and we have the first fully filmed and produced sound film made in Portugal that is called A Canção de Lisboa, the Song of Lisbon. It was shot by an architect. He was to be the main architect of the Portuguese Exposition of 1940. He was connected to the regime, but he was not a fascist by heart. So we have here several nuances. And this was one of the first films in Portuguese history to be released on DVD and to be restored by Portuguese Film Library because it was very important as the first sound feature. But if we analyze some sequences from A Canção de Lisboa, that was precisely in the year of 1933, we may think about okay, this is idealized Lisbon, has nothing to do with the reality, everything is mise en scène, as a propaganda, but there is not quite the case with this first film that will be the base of all the comedies made almost until today on Portuguese film history. Because if we go to a Canção de Lisboa, and I will not play this with sound because it is in Portuguese, so uh, we don't need to hear. But we have these characters. This one is trying to escape from the father of the girl because, of course, he will be very angry when he finds out that they are dating because he's a bad student and all of that. And then we have this moment when the character disguises himself of a doll on this tailor store, and the camera focus, of course, on this. They are talking about, they are making conversation about sales, and then we have this sign that says ocasião. It's kind of sales, 95 escudos, Estado Novo. Of course, this can be seen as a good propaganda, but if we analyze the sequence, we see that there is a small kid that is not very polite, and he starts to mess around with the doll, pushing it, and the doll strikes back. And of course, there is a comic gag between the living doll and the non-living doll. And at the end of the sequence, of course, the Estado Novo doll has some horns like a devil. He's criticized. And at the end, because of a rat, the Estado Novo sign goes to the back of this lady. So it's not a very pleasant position for the name of the dictatorship. So this is the first sound film. It was sponsored by the state, and somehow it came across the censorship. Of course, this is very ambiguous because it can be, yes, we are joking around about the Estado Novo. We all talk about Estado Novo, but we can think about this as something like, okay, it's not very much a tongue-in-cheek criticism, but we have to take into attention the context of reception of these films, because when we have a sequence like this is on an assembly, a social assembly on a neighborhood, a cultural event, we have all of this pomp and circumstance, like if it was a very formal event, because we are going to elect the queen of the tailors, and of course the main character will elect his own daughter because he sees a lot of confusion in the jury. So he will solve the problem, and he will solve and be a critic, a social critic to all these kind of more or less transparent policies that go around in neighborhoods, assemblies, and so on. But we have to take into account that we are on a corporativism state. So this is like a microcosmos of the country. And we also have to take into account that at the same year, the same actor with the same name, with the same character, appeared on a theater play, a revista, a Portuguese review, a kind of humoristic theater play, interpreting Alfaiate or Taylor Caetano. It was Taylor Oliveira, like Oliveira Salazar, and Oliveira was a caricature of Oliveira Salazar. And then, of course, when we mix all of this, of course, we see the same actor with the same name, with the same role, doing more or less the same things in the play and in the film. And then a crack opens, and we can see some subversion here. Of course, the censorship is not very strict, gives gives a lot of freedom for these humoristic critics in the beginning of the 1930s. And of course, nobody can confirm this. Nobody has lived long enough to confirm. Yes, yes, of course, this was Salazar. This was a kind of political joke. No, of course, nobody can address this. It's only a supposition, of course. But when we analyze the character, we see that he has a new store that was founded in 1926, like the Portuguese dictatorship. It was licensed by Coimbra, like Salazar, and the officials were instructed in the process by German and Italian officers, and he has a very strict cut service, like because he was minister of the economy and finance, and of course he works on he has the store on Travessa dos Fiéis de Deus, something like he's very keen to God. 28 the year he came into power in Lisboa. So this is very much a political caricature of Salazar. And then in the dialogue, Caetano speaks with a character that is called Tobis, like the Portuguese studio, and with another one that is called Calado or Silent. Really a joke with the silent and the sound film. And of course, Calado asks if the customers are arising. And the tailor says, you don't imagine the amount of people that comes to me to turn the coat. So there is here a very, very much tongue-in-cheek context. And of course, in the caricature that was made before, we even have iron because, of course, a tailor needs an iron. But our propaganda secretary of state was called Antonio Ferro, translated like Anthony Iron. So the idea that it was only need to go to the iron and then the propaganda was made. That was a dialogue also in the play. But of course, in 1938, we have the first strict propaganda film created by the Estado Novo. And this film was released in 2018 by Cinemateca Portuguesa, was again one of the first editions of Cinemateca, and this film was created by António Lopes Ribeiro and the same António Ferro. It's quite a straightforward adaptation of a political adversary conversion to the cause. Nothing new here, but it has the comical context of Canção de Lisboa. So we can see that Canção de Lisboa is somehow appropriated by the propaganda film and then mixed with another kind of discourse. But we have access to this on DVD, and as a historical source and as a historical source for our democracy to study and to interpret and to create a discourse about this film. So Cinemateca has a role in the release of this film as a way of calling attention to the role of film in propaganda. There were more films that were created in this context, but this is the most famous, the first and the only one released, and is, in film terms, quite good in its strategies, quite bad in other ways, of course. But from the 1940s onwards, we have the comedies and the historical films. All of them we had commercial DVD releases. All of them were more or less popular, and a phenomenon came to be because a film like Pátio das Cantigas from 1941 is a film that it's almost like Canção de Lisboa, but it's completely under the political correctness of the dictatorship. So everyone has its place in the society. There is no tongue-in-cheek political satire. There is only a reference to the war, because the best way to emphasize that Portugal is a neutral uh, country is to play with war, and so there is a very famous scene where everyone goes a little bit nuts. It's a kind of tradition in Portuguese film, of course, and then there is a conflict that comes to be a mock war, and then this character saves all the children, all the helpless children, and says something like, "Okay, you can be quite safe because no harm will come to you here," and then the camera tilts to the top of the car, and amongst a very great fanfare, we see the name Salazar. And we have this kind of non official propaganda in this film. And of course, the producer was Antonio Lopes Ribeiro, the director of the propaganda film. So we have these connections, but for our memory, for our for the critical fortune of these films, Canção de Lisboa, with its nuances, e Pátio das Cantigas, with its straightforwardness and implicit propaganda discourse, came to mix in our democratic view, and even under the Portugal till 1974. So we have to deconstruct a lot of these nuances. We are going to pass Camões, but until 1974 there was a problem with film, because Italy, of course, gave us neorealism. And of course, even if neorealism came a little bit at the end of the war, 1943, 1944, it came to be only after the war. But in Portugal, we had the censorship. So our neorealism was always called into account like bad filming by both the situation and by both the new filmmakers that want something very spectacular, very like Vittorio De Sica or something like that. But of course, we didn't have the means. Vittorio De Sica had Cinecittà, had free regime. We didn't have that. So our few neo-realist filmmakers had to found their own productions. And then when Cinema Novo, our Portuguese new wave, came to be in the 1960s, there was a kind of paradox because neorealism was very much into the censorship attention. They tailored all the films they cut, they prohibited some of them, and the Cine Club and associations movement was very, very strong. They were creating film festivals, they were creating reunions, they were gathering crowds to present prohibited films, and of course, the, the dictatorship act and dismantled all most of the cine clubs, and then created this kind of strange situation because it promoted the new filmmakers because these new filmmakers very much influenced by French New Wave and by formalism, they didn't want to talk about politics. They did want to talk about film. So until 1974, more or less, we had this 1950s with the old film agonizing, the neorealism never coming to be, the Cine Club movement and the movie magazines movement almost controlled by the censorship and by the dictatorship, and the new filmmakers, the hope of revolution, only created a revolution in formal terms, not on thematic terms, in the because of two main reasons. The first one, they were not very much interested in that, and the second reason, the few that tried censorship act. And then, of course, we have the revolution. And another paradox came to be because that new that new wave of Portuguese filmmakers uh, created a very intellectual cinema. So the um, so-called revolutionary sector, more to the left of the forces that came into power after 1974, they didn't like those films because they didn't provide the needed vehicle for propaganda of ideas, of revolutionary ideas. So the paradox was they came to call the old filmmakers and to create a discourse that only ceased to exist after the 25th of November when the situation came to be more or less calm without the apparent risk of a civil war or the things going almost to the Soviet backed regime or something like that. So, Portuguese film role uh, on the resistance to the dictatorship is very much a theme that has to be studied, has to be debated, and has to be analyzed on the images that were created and on the images that were produced, received and understood or not understood, and on the releases, because this film from 1975, The People and the Weapons, about the 1st of May of 1974, is a collective film. It was released in 2020 by the Portuguese Film Library, a restored version. It was seen after a long, long time with the restoration by the Portuguese Film Library, and it was released only after the dictatorship period films. So it's kind of a policy of creating sources for studying under the democratic regime this issue. Here we have. And then in 1981, we have a very, very interesting experience. Bom Povo Português, that was found footage, a commentary, a documentary, but more of a commentary that created the period between the 25th of April and the 25th of November as a failed Plato's allegory of the cave. So the Portuguese came out of the cave, they were blind by the light, and then they go into the cave again. And this film that was directed by Rui Simões, it was released by the privately released by Rui Simões on DVD. It was the first time that a film about the revolution and about that period and about the dictatorship came to be released on DVD. Not an state backed release, but a private release by its director. So a little bit the counter movement that he had in the political context of the 1980s in Portugal, that was very much to stabilize the country, to go into Europe, into the not the European Union, but the European Community, and he had a very bitter view of that. It came to be until the release on DVD of this film that dealt with colonialism issues and all of this, but not an official release. Of course, we had no censorship now, so it was not prohibited. But it was a piece of resistance in the 1980s and now on DVD as well. And we have the role of José Mário Branco, that is the film narrator and the text author, and that released a song on more or less the same year with a similar narrative of the revolution's aftermath. And then in 2010 we had Fantasia Lusitana. It was a little bit like Bom Povo Português, but it was made by João Canijo, a very young at the time, in his 40s, Portuguese filmmaker, and he created this mise en scène of the regime, creating a balance between the footage shot by the regime in the newsreels, the discourses of Salazar, and then the comments of three non-Portuguese visitors in neutral Lisbon. One of them was Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the French writer. And then at the end of the film is always black and white, and at the end of the film, a very colorful image of the inauguration of the monument to Christ the King on the other side of the river, that demonstrates a little bit like the opposite of the Wizard of Oz, that the reality was in black and white, but it was a dreamlike reality, and the harshness of a regime that is completely out of fashion and is almost frozen in time is now in full color. And it was released in 2010, and then by a Portuguese firm, Midas, that ceased to exist. And then in 2017, the sources of this film, of this footage, were released by the Portuguese Film Library, the Newsreel Journal, and the next journals were also released in the Portuguese Digital Film Library. So we have in the 1980s this kind of commentary based on the reading of pre-existing footage that gives a new meaning to them. In 2010 we have another view of this time focusing on the Estado Novo time. here it is. But it is quite a mess for the academics because he combines sound with image out of context. So until the release of the original sources, very much of the newsreel footage came from this. And then we have in 2025 of April an adventure through democracy by Edgar Pera. It was a stately sponsored a film by the Centro de Documentação 25 de Abril, and it was a film that for the first time, using the same method of Rui Simões and in Bom Povo Português and João Canijo in 2010, but with the role of the filmmaker, took notice and give a voice to the idea of manipulation because it was a video essay and the role of the filmmaker as the one that combines sound, combines images, gives meaning, gives reading is very much the centerpiece of this short film that is available online. And but it is very important and a little bit or underestimated by academics because it mingles the Portuguese struggle and the adventure through democracy that is constantly building itself as Giuseppe will talk, and the idea of the liberation of Timor that was a main issue on this period. So past and present and future came to be. But even then, Edgar Pera takes side because in the final credits he labels the intervenients, and some of them are fascists and some of them are not. And some of the fascists are the first persons, for example, the first president of the Republic, General Antonio de Spínola. So it has some political statements in the middle. So it has yet to be carefully analyzed. It was part of this package, and it's a very important film essay. If you want to search for it, there is a version with Portuguese, with English subtitles, and it's very interesting as a film in itself. So we have a lot of questions. I'm sorry if I didn't provide any answers, but this is a forum, so we have to debate. So over to you, Giuseppe, and thank you so much.
No, if I can go, no, I have to thank you also because you allowed me to come back a bit to the years of high school because I had a course on cinema there, and especially was on the very old the movies of the beginning of history of cinema, and I remember some passages of that. Of course, we had not covered at the time Portuguese movies because it was very introductory, and but because we were in high school. I'm grateful for this, and also on occasion to remember Professor Bianco that was teaching us, that unfortunately has left us a few years ago. And it's important. It's important to consider culture as something that goes much beyond the single object we observe. There is much tendency to observe a movie, a speech, performance as just the creation of an individual or of a group of people with as entertainment, no, or as something that we consider for maybe its visual elements, or because it's beautiful, it's part of our culture. But yes, there is this tendency in some discourse to almost reduce the role of cultural objects, that in my opinion is quite dangerous because it can lead to some manipulation. And I would like to start from this because it's something we are seeing right now in Italy. I will mention that a few weeks ago, a speech prepared by a writer, became very famous for having written up many novels inspired by the story of Mussolini, called M. And Scurati, prominent anti-fascist author in Italy, and was asked by a TV show to have a speech on the 25th of April, in another day, just a few days before the Liberation Day that we share with Portugal. It's the same date, though different years. And we discovered that this person got censored. And censorship happened not in a public, open way, but they just phone called him and said, no, you will not come here. We will not give you the money we promised you, and you are not welcome to the show anymore. And neither the TV presenter of the show, that is also a journalist, was aware of this. And so she discovered in the morning, imagine, in the morning she discovers this just randomly talking with colleagues for an event that happened in the night, and she posted on social media. So why I'm telling you this story? Because I think it's connected to the value of cultural products, of culture in general. Because Scurati, who was not interested in the money, of course, because it's a ridiculous amount of money for television that was granted to him, although the public broadcasting mentioned many times it's for this, we didn't want to pay him 1,800 euros. I know there is a different, the euro has a different value between Italy and Portugal, but still I think it's not a lot of money here, no, and neither here. So they say this to say, okay, this is an object we buy, and it's an object we don't want to buy because it's expensive for us. So that's it. It's not censorship. It was just expensive. And with the same argument was immediately attacked by the same author, because the author did something very smart. He gave the speech for free then. He said, well, of course it has never been a problem of money, because I don't make a living out of this. So he gave the permission to the TV presenter to read the speech. The speech was read by the TV presenter. The speech was then diffused everywhere. Like, I participated to a 25th of April celebration in a little town in Tuscany, and they were reading it there, and it was read everywhere in the 25th of April in Milan, where there was a very big and participated demonstration. Everywhere this speech arrived, exactly because it was not just an amount of letters or something amusing people. It was something with a political meaning, and something which the powerful can fear. And again, trying to come back to that, the president of the government, Giorgia Meloni, did something, trying to, again, to turn the discussion in her favor. So saying, no, which censorship? Oh, no censorship. You can read it. And she posted, of course, without authorization, she posted the entire speech on her own Facebook. Again, with the idea, but censorship of what? I'm not scared of this object. I am not in the position to say that the Prime Minister was directly involved in the censoring of the speech. There is no evidence. I think things will emerge. At the same time, now we know that Serena Bortone, that is the journalist and TV presenter that denounced the happening and read the speech anyways, now is under a disciplinary procedure in the Italian TV. So she has risks for her career, and it's formal. It's not something, an opinion. And so there is a process of attempting to control culture. I am sorry to have started with this, moving a bit away from the question, because there is now an attempt to control culture. This attempt goes not only with limiting things made by people, but also, so as a bit, you were also saying in your much more complex and articulated presentation, also promoting things. So the control of culture in Italy now is represented by an exposition on Giovanni Gentile, has been Minister of Education during fascist Italy. Also, he comes from the hometown of my grandparents in Western Sicily, and I observed, for example, as TV broadcasting on the first news on TV, TG1, that was on this exposition. That, in my opinion, showed quite clearly which was the goal of this. That was the exposition. Giovanni Gentile was a great philosopher, intellectual, was a person that did many, many things and should be respected for what he did, despite the fact that then, in my opinion, in the opinion of everyone trusting Italian democracy, he did the bad thing. No, he joined the wrong side, and he was not a person with a card of the fascist party. He was a member of the fascist government, so a person with high responsibility and also with high privileges coming from this responsibility that he took. And then he died, and he was killed by anti-fascists because there was a war, and he was an enemy in a war, in a civil confrontation, in a resistance war, and he died. And this, I don't know, I have not been at the exposition, but the TV broadcasting was all about enlisting all the things Giovanni Gentile did in a way that probably Giovanni Gentile would have hated, because he was just saying he did this, just in a list, not explaining anything. The philosopher of idealism. You say the philosopher of idealism to a normal person in the street. I don't think this person knows perfectly, the bibliography you refer to, or whatever. No, it's just a word, and then it says he worked for the encyclopedia, just to say at the end, the great thinker of fascism. And when the journalist says this, there is the Minister of Culture with the President of the Senate, both former fascist, former people with fascist heritage, let's say, and the President of the Senate has a collection of images of Mussolini at home, so it's not something... and they are quite ambiguous in saying whether they are fascists or not today, but they come from that political culture. So they are shaking hands, happy, and they cut the ribbon, of course, the ribbon at the beginning of the exposition, while the journalist says the intellectual of fascism. So what are they trying to do? In my opinion, and it's not in reality just my opinion, I'm sharing, of course, with my words, so it's not as good as other people could have done, but I want to mention Eric Gobetti, and a speech he made at the last youth assembly of the AMPI, the National Partisan Association of Italy, that was founded by anti-fascists and people that joined the resistance, the armed resistance in Italy and the Liberation War, and then by people that are cultivating the memory of that experience and of the creation of our constitution. That's also the thing I'm wearing now from that organization. And Eric Gobetti is an historian, said something that I totally agree with. They talk about pacification in the country, but what they want is anti-fascist surrender. The point is that, and this is quite evident in the speeches of Giorgia Meloni, it's evident in the fact that they continue to use the symbol of the former fascist party, not the one under the regime, but the following one, the one in the Republic, in the logo of the current ruling party of Italy. They say all the time, we have been object of an unjust exclusion. We are people with the roots in the Movimento Sociale Italiano, post-fascist party made by fascist hierarchy leaders immediately after the war, because in Italy we pardoned them all. And I want to underline that for what I will say in a bit, because of the decision of Palmiro Togliatti, that was member of the government and that was leader of the Italian Communist Party, that decided it was the strategy to avoid continuing let's say, what was a war in our country, also with foreign powers in it, but was a liberation war also from what we had inside, and from a government, a fascist government. It was an Italian government. And They were pardoned, and of course they stayed for almost the entirety of the Republic as a party with presence in the parliament, because no one blocked them from joining elections, although the fascist term is impossible to use because it's written in the constitution. And Giorgia Meloni, in the first speech, said, I have been excluded, a person that when she was, I think, 30 was minister. So I don't think, if you have been minister in your 30s, I don't think you are a person excluded from politics or in a discrimination setting. Of course, she has discrimination as a woman, but for the rest, I don't think there's much, especially on these members of her party have been part of governments in the last decades. And they made all of this narrative on the fact that they have been excluded, that Italy has been ruled by the left. That is an historical false assumption, because a few years have been in governments with the participation of the left, but nothing with Italy has never had a communist dictatorship, as some of them like to say. And they say this especially on culture. They affirm that on culture there is communist people imposing the agenda, imposing the things that are said, and blocking the others from publishing, from saying their opinions. That is something absolutely false, because they publish always. There have always been even far right publishers in the country. These false statements have to be considered in an idea, again mentioning Eric Gobetti, of surrender. They want to say, we have won this battle, we were excluded, we managed to gain the government with our allies, but as people with that heritage, you didn't manage to stop us, and now it's our turn. This is something that I'm not saying, it's something they say. It's our turn. It's our turn to control the public TV. It's our turn to say to journalists with notes from ministries what they can say and what they cannot say. It's our turn to have speeches made by the government, or even in international settings in which there are no questions. So there are fake questions made by the staff of the government to the president of the government instead of questions with journalists. So these are all ways to change, no? But in their narrative, it's a narrative of competition, of having won a competition by the will of the people. And this they say, no, the previous government, Italy has a more parliamentary-based system. So it's quite essential that in Italy there is agreement between political parties, although the right wing made anti-constitutional reforms of that in the past, of course, have been cancelled because we have a constitutional court, and although slow, it arrives at the point. It says, oh yeah, you cannot give to a political coalition of parties the 55% of the seats of the lower house just because they arrived first, because it's not representative, it's not proportional in any way. Why? It's a gift. What is it about? They tried this, so these constitutional things, and I want to say I am focusing on the right wing that is now in power, but these things have some elements that have been, some seeds that have been distributed by previous political components, even from the center left. And so this idea that we need someone taking decisions from the country, being fast, and then every 5 years the people decide if they agreed with what this person did or not. Of course, without any serious, in my opinion, the opinion of people much more expert than me, serious counterbalances. Because in the US, you elect the president, the president stays his 4-year, or hopefully in the future, his 4-year term, and of course, yeah. Every 4 years you change the president unless they leave us earlier. Something not nice, but they have counterbalances. They have other things. The president of the U.S. quite often has no what we would call parliamentary majority in the Congress. We have institutions that counterbalance themselves. In the United Kingdom, we have other balances existing. And what is happening is that a system totally based on parliamentary balances, and so on the fact that you have a majority and opposition, that usually this majority is not composed by just one party, or is a majority mixed with many components that can also change their mind and change the government. This is totally disrupted. And for example, the control on also on the security, on the control on the pluralism in information is affected by the fact that they are playing these cards. They are changing the dynamics. And I don't know how much time do I have because I've not watched in case you make me signs. This anti-fascist surrender is based on the idea, first of all, on a inferiority complex, in my opinion, that is present in the right wing, because they still consider themselves as the people defeated in the resistance and in the foundation of the country as Italy is now. And this is something that is true by their choice, in the sense that Giorgia Meloni was not alive during the fascist regime. She would be absolutely free to say, I am anti-fascist, I don't agree with that regime, I want to change the state. It's something that someone can say legitimately, the constitution can be changed, but in a way then that is not with the problems of, let's say, autocratic or leaning to autocratic, authoritarian governments. While this is not happening, they keep this ambiguity because they keep these connections with the far right. In some cases, they want to recognize themselves as part of that story. And in my opinion, it's quite problematic that I will be quite honest here. I don't see the necessary answers from their partners that are not from that story, both inside the party, because there are many people, in my opinion, the majority of people in the ruling party today are not people coming from post-fascist heritage. It's a lot of people just doing politics because they are generically conservative. They have ideas, of course, that are very far from mine, but can be legitimate. It's people that just do more territorial proximity politics. It's problematic that they don't stop these processes. And at the same time, it's problematic that their allies don't stop them, because this government is in power thanks to a law that gave them an advantage because it has a majoritarian component that made them win the majority in both chambers, despite they had no majority between the voters, but they were the first coalition and they got a majority in a less unlawful way than in the past, but still in a way that is that happened. And their way, their coalition is plural. There are different ideas in them. There are parties with different heritages. It's dangerous, in my opinion, that they are not stopping them from doing so. And there are some things in common with the period in which Berlusconi was in power. So not post-fascist at all, but although many people, in this case, I think a mistake from the left. Many people said that Berlusconi is fascist. It's not true, has never been true, and Berlusconi has never had sympathies for fascism, although he allowed the entrance of far-right people and former fascists in government with him, but he was not like them, and he was always quite clear in being different from them. And of course, in his government, we had elements of control on these things, of course, supported by the fact that he was the main publisher in the country, owning important newspapers, owning the biggest publisher of books in the country also in the cinema. But I have to say in the cinema is curious because his production produced also movies that were not at all in his favor. This I think because he was a good businessman and he left the right people to do the right things to make companies work. But it's important that somehow there is a comeback of a sort of sentiment of attachment to the constitution and to the only moment in which Italy has enjoyed democracy and has enjoyed something that, inclusion for the vast majority of people in the country, in the sense that before the constitution, women had not right to vote. So half of the country was systematically excluded from any democratic process. Quite recently, the movie that has won the maximum amount of David di Donatello by Paola Cortellesi. I don't remember that I saw it's also in Portuguese cinemas now. In Italy, it's C'è ancora domani. There's still tomorrow. I don't know. It's called it's with this pink graphic. Yes. You will find. I saw it in the metro today, so it's.
I don't remember the title in Portuguese, but I know.
It's this fantastic movie on the women condition. Mm-hmm. In that case, Paola Cortellesi decided to have all the movie black and white, to say, we want you to be connected to the context. The movie won everything and is a big success. It's has been the most viewed movie in Italy in the last year. And in my opinion, it's very important because it shows something that in the years that by some people are used as with nostalgia, you can look at them in black and white, but still women couldn't talk about politics. And even rich women were said, no, you cannot talk about politics. There is a beautiful scene in which father and son talk about the referendum on monarchy versus republic. It was together with the election of the Constituent Assembly that then wrote the Constitution. And that they discuss, the mother, wife arrives, says her idea, and the father says, please stay after stay where you should stay. It's not a discussion for you. So this is important, and so allow me the expression. In my opinion, it's important to consider also a bit the opposite of what the movie does. That it's not in black and white. It was not in black and white because too often people see democracy as something necessarily connected to the present, and authoritarianism as the far past. Of course, I think there is a big difference with your country, also with Spain, with Greece, talking about Europe, many other countries across the world. There is the fact that in Italy, effectively, we have democracy since the end of the Second World War, while in other countries, the experience of dictatorship was much closer and is much closer today. But it's important to understand that the fact that these people don't walk with strange hats or no one is saying that they are exactly fascists as Mussolini. In my opinion, also the usage of the fascist term is a personal choice. I would not call them fascists. It's not the point for me. The point is that they are putting again into debate things that were already part of the pacification we had in the country. A pacification that, and so again I mentioned Eric Gobetti, a pacification that involved them because they were not killed, because they were pardoned, each of them, and with the exception of a few of them, they were killed during the actions. But there was no court against the fascist crimes. And it's something that paradoxically puts Italy in a much more it was very open towards them. Because we never had the moment in which, okay, you were part of the fascist party, now you die. You were part of the fascist party, you did this, you go to jail. No, we never had this. We had the war, we had the resistance. Some of them were killed because they were fighting with the Germans and with the Nazis for the control of northern and central Italy. When there was the occupation, Mussolini was killed because he was Mussolini. Yes. And some of them were killed because they were recognized. Giovanni Gentile I mentioned before. But there was never in Italy, we never had a cleaning, a moment in which we were killing everyone, we were arresting everyone that was part of us. So, which pacification are they looking for? The danger is that the pacification they are looking for is, on the contrary, the silencing of memory. In this case, I would say. And so we come back to the topic here. And the silencing of the memory is also connected to the revival of a nationalist thinking that is also quite blurred by the fact that at the same time they are working to reduce the role of the central state, because they're working for an extreme regionalism, especially of the rich region of the country, with a constitutional reform. Of course, they are voting it alone in the parliament, and we will arrive to referendum, I think, quite probably, in which the people will choose. And in this revival of Italian nationalism, they use some things that are quite problematic for the term, again, of pacification, because they have, and this started, I have to say, with Berlusconi already, but they are doing this in a quite extreme way, again, on the television, with the advertising on the streets. I mean, for example, creating this strong connection between Italian resistance and the Yugoslav resistance. And they say, okay, we have evidence of Yugoslav crimes. Then they exaggerate. And again, I will not mention data because Eric Gobetti has done a fantastic work debunking all the things they affirm that are false. Although horrible things happened in the border between the changing border during the war between Italy and Yugoslavia and the occupied territories, because Italy was occupying part of that country in those years of the war. And so this correspondence, the communists there did crimes, so for sure communists here did the crimes. All partisans were communists. If you are a true Italian, you are not a communist, you are not anti-fascist. While we know that not all partisans and resistance members were communists. On the contrary, there was, of course, half of them were communists because the Communist Party was better organized. But I think there are similarities, and at the same time, it's important that the other groups, almost everyone, because I don't think there are many people today claiming to be Stalinist communists, as could have done in that times, that they get the ownership of a democratic process that created our democracy and the Constitution. Yeah. I'm sorry for being a bit circular, but I think it's
it is great. Thank you so much.
Open to questions and everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Maybe they went on a break.
The translation is
there is one in it.
Yeah. In the next page. pessoa está na linha.
Have you watched it?
No, no, not yet. It's on my list.
And I was saying it is now on mine as well.
Ah, great.
Thank you.
This one and the one with Juliette Binoche that arrived yesterday.
Oh,
What's the name in Portuguese?
Temos sempre uma
Is
linha
it still
cá no
transmitting?
continente.
I'm not sure what is happening, so if you want to keep on speaking, would you want to comment anything about what he said?
Oh, yes, I can comment because, well, it was a coincidence, but I watched documentary about Mussolini's path and dismiss, of course. And I also found that, like in German, but in a different way, more related to Portugal, I guess. At least from 1943 onwards, there was a lot of differences between even in the fascist party or in the fascist organizations, and the king expelled Mussolini, and then another fascist was put on power, and then Mussolini came back with as a puppet state leader by German Nazi occupators, and it was quite interesting the way Mussolini built his image through media, and the survival of this image on public monuments, on heritage, and I guess it was kind of a clever way to use Italy's heritage or Roman heritage, ancient Rome, not Rome the city, but Rome, the ancient Rome, because when I was in Rome on the last year on May, more or less a year ago, we still had a lot of crowns and laurels with the 25th of April. And it was a kind of, I guess Meloni was in power, and it was a kind of pageantry that reminded me of the mise en scène created by the fascist regime. And then, of course, I am art historian, so I'm always paying attention to detail. And then I found some elements like silver covers and something like that that still had the inscription of the fascist regime, like we have in Portugal. But it was very, I guess it was more cleverly done and more dangerously cleverly done in Italy than in German, because the image of ancient Rome was so strong and the connection was so close that the SPQR, the Senatus Populus Humanos, was almost an universal language that fascism could use. And I guess, at least I interpreted a little bit like Meloni and well, we don't really know if I am fascist or not regime, but I have more or less the same ideals. Politicians, I guess they are trying, as you have said. I'm not informed, of course, but I that was a little bit emphasized at the end of the documentary, because the documentary is is very recent. I guess it's very dangerous because this wound is a little bit open and they are tearing it apart because there was no break, not before and after, but a smooth transition. Am I correct? It's
Yeah.
more or less the same. I don't know if we are.
Should we go? I go. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I know. In this I totally agree, and it's paradoxical because of the number of people involved in the resistance. We are talking about so many Italians being involved, despite just half of the country was under occupation.
Yes, yes.
So it's important to mention this, and despite that, you will find, and historians have found, and members of the association found, many people around the south of Italy that were there, and instead of escaping and trying to go to the south, stayed there. The liberation of Turin was led by Colajanni, we call it Commander Barbato, that was from Sicily, and he was leading the liberation of the city. So this was the problem that, in my opinion, we have is that we have a clear change within the people. Movements, Italian democracy didn't come back after the war because someone said, okay, these are the political parties, you play with them. No, these parties were rooted in the resistance and were rooted in years of undercover organizing. And this I come back also a bit to what I studied. I studied political organizations, and there are continuities. We had political continuities that then created the democratic setting with millions of people, members of political parties, millions of people involved in democracy, and in a democracy that involved the highest percentages of voters in the world. Probably, I don't know if there are countries. In Italy, it was normal to have elections with more than 90% of people attending for 60 years. We're not talking about something that happened the first 2-3 elections, despite a situation in which then Italy had a limited democracy because of the international setting, because not the second biggest political party could have never ruled the country. Yeah, so it's super important to understand, and this is the first element, in my opinion, we have to put in contrast to the one that said, oh no, it was an intellectual thing, anti-fascism, these liberal ideas of democracy. No, this was popular work, while the thing that survived, I think unfortunately for the political element, fortunately for the human element, was the elites. The elites survived the fascist regime. The elites stayed, and you find them. You find them, their heirs, in the republic and in its structures, police, the army, political parties, and this stays as a problem because if Italy had so many attempts of democratic backlash with attempts of coup, was for this.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I think.
We'll be closer.
Ale, puoi venire nel caso... Ok. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
How is
Yes.
it going?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
My internet is not working. Give me a second.
But I can hear you.
It's
Yeah,
loading.
Okay, but
Let me try.
give it just a second. Sorry. This is the problem.
Oh,
Okay.
there's a possible.
We can turn off. Liga o link. Não, mas eu ligo os fones. Põe os fones e então.
O meu telefone não dá para estes fones. Não dá.
LSBC.
Give it just a second, we have some small technical issue. Give it just a second.
Deixa eu ver se isto
Oh,
não dá mesmo.
try. Okay, no, wait.
Deixa eu ver se agora dá mesmo. Foi abaixo mesmo no momento.
Diciamo uno scambio di
Bolso
feedback.
direito do casaco ou bolso esquerdo.
Comunque sempre non c'è problema.
Também, é uma conotação política.
Isto?
Está à esquerda, não está?
Não sei, mas estava bem posto, acho que.
Obrigada.
Posso dare un altro?
I have another as well if needed.
No, I think
I
it's
have
okay
many.
now. Thank you.
Io vi chiedo scusa, però siccome sapevo che era fino alle 5, c'è una persona che è venuta a prendermi poi, perché il rispetto dei diritti dei lavoratori non mi voglio far aspettare ulteriormente. Mi dispiace, ma ripeto, non mi sembra giusto che vada pronto. Scusatemi.
Mi dispiace che siamo andati lunghi.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so we have just finished our discussion with Ugo and Giuseppe. I don't know if you want to give you a summary of what was discussed, or if you want to go first.
Are you talking with me or with Ugo? Okay. Okay. We had a long meeting, and now we are saying bye to Maria Letizia Colaiani that stayed with us, and she told us about the resistance of women, the forgotten one. And it has been a really good, nice pleasure to have you here. Grazie.
Grazie a voi e scusate.
And we also had Renato Franzitta and Bruno Madera, as you know. With Renato, we listened about the story of fascism connected to the present time. So he made tell us many details passing through many years of history, telling about fascism and anti-fascism movement, about the story of trade unions parties and yes, anti-fascism. Okay, so as I was saying, we had Renato Franzitta, and then we had Bruno Madeira that told us about the story of anti-fascist resistance in Portugal, and he also mentioned the Italian resistance and the anniversary that we celebrate together, the 25th of April, and yeah, it was longer than this, of course, but it's difficult now to sum up the highlights of this meeting. And we also have a story from one guest that told us about the story of his grandfather, aunt, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that sounds great. For our part, we had Hugo explaining to us a lot of the Portuguese films that marked the dictatorship and the revolution, and all the challenges and the paradox that came with it. So it was very interesting to see some of the film experts and interpret them in different ways that I personally had never looked at them in that way. Um, and then we had a conversation about this. The Ugo's intervention led to a conversation by Giuseppe on the control of culture and how cultural plays a role that goes beyond individual production and that should be seen through the social context of the country. So we talked a lot about the Italian context today of fascism and democracy and how it interplays together. We talked a lot about, we heard Giuseppe speaking a lot about Giuseppe's Maloney Party, how the limits are not so strict defined between what is fascism and what is not fascism, but how they try to get away with it somehow. And yeah, we had also, we talked a lot about the Italian nationalism and what are some historical things that happened in the time of Mussolini's regime. Yeah, so it was a very great, conversation between our two speakers, and we thank you very much for being here and learning, having the ability to learn from you.
I will give time to the interpreter, my colleague Alessandra, that will translate. Thank you.
Ok, allora nel dibattito che è stato affrontato oggi in Portogallo si sono sentiti diversi punti di vista e analizzati diversi riscontri che sono appunto emersi da questo interessante dibattito. La conversazione si è incentrata principalmente sui due interventi principali che hanno più o meno vertito su come la cultura giochi un ruolo centrale nel contesto sociale e politico che è stato trattato, in particolare è stato trattato il contesto italiano, ma anche quello portoghese, il fascismo e la democrazia, e quindi si è trattato nello specifico cosa si intende al giorno d'oggi per fascismo e cosa appunto non può essere più ritenuto fascismo, un po' quello che abbiamo anche riassunto in questa sessione, e anche di nazionalismo italiano. Quindi è stata un'ottima conversazione, un ottimo dibattito e alla fine si ringrazia per i vari interventi.
Thank you, Ale. So what do you think? Is that done?
Yeah, I think for us, yeah.
I would say thank you very much to our guest. Your presence, contribution, attention was really precious for us. And as a thank you, I will tell you that outside there is a coffee break with salty food. And if you want to enjoy, stay with us to exchange some feedback in another way. And I ask you to sign the attendance sheets that now Domenica will share with you. And I say thank you. Grazie. Grazie.
Vi ringrazio per la presenza brevemente.
Okay, so I think this is the end of this Transnational Memory Forum. We thank our guests here in Lisbon and also to your guests in Palermo. I think it was very interesting to have this memory forum and to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.